Hey, Husker fans, welcome back to the Husker Big Red YouTube channel. I'm Chris Peterson, and joining me as always is Danny Gillette. And we're back here on this Thursday morning with another episode of our podcast. And we're going to talk some in state recruiting, some transfer portal targets, and Nebraska popping up in some post spring top 25. So we're going to talk about all that. Before we get into it, if you guys haven't done so already, please do us the huge favor of hitting the subscribe button. Make sure you hit the like button. Tell your family and friends about Husker Big Red and huskerbigred.com. And so, yeah, Danny, let's get into it, man. How you doing on this Thursday, though?
Good. The weather's better. It's looking pretty sunny. Summer's around the corner, and believe it or not, college football is closer than we think. So, all good. Pretty tired from the Celtics and Bruins, but takes a lot out of me. I treat the Celtics and Bruins like a live or die situation, but that's the same thing I do with Nebraska. So maybe it's just the fan in me.
Yeah, that's got to be stressful though, having two teams, deep in
Yeah.
the playoff hunt, and probably playing games on the same night. Maybe sometimes I don't know how that works
Every other
always,
night.
but
So the Celtics were on Monday,
okay.
Bruins were on Tuesday. No, sorry. Bruins were on Monday, Celtics Tuesday, Bruins yesterday, Celtics tonight, Bruins Friday, Celtics Saturday, Bruins Sunday.
That's good. At least they got it, not on the same night for you guys, so that's a good thing. But yeah, it's getting up close to being football time here. We got some crappy weather here in Montana. It's like winter here, but that is what it is. I actually did an interview for my day job with a guy from the Boston College Eagles, my guy Reed Harris. So
Yep. Yep.
yeah, he had a good spring game. So I talked to him from Great Falls, Montana, the other day.
Yeah, I'm excited to see what Bill can do over there, and I think he's re-energized the program, so that's good.
Yeah, it was interesting talking to him about Bill O'Brien and how they all found out about Jeff Halfley and stuff like that. But at any rate, let's talk some Nebraska football here. And wanted to start off with the recruiting. I know there's a lot of recruiting news going on, but I thought it was really interesting with Nebraska coaches this week were able to go out on the road, not Matt Rule. So he wasn't able to do that. That's just the recruiting rules. But you saw with Chase Lofton, Christian Jones, Jackson Carpenter, I think Pierce Mooberry, Connor
Yep.
Booth, Caden Vermoss,
Yep.
Tyson Terry. The Nebraska coaching staff went out in full force with all these guys, stopped at their school. I think it was, especially important with Chase Lofton and, Christian Jones, the two targets they're trying to reel in still, Mooberry as well. So, I mean, I like what they're doing and the effort. And, I've said on this channel a bunch, but if you're going to beat Matt Rule and the Cornhuskers for an in-state recruit, like you're going to have to work your tail off to get it because Nebraska's not going to be outworked, especially for these in-state guys.
Absolutely not. And we said this before too, but it's good to see the in-state guys finally taking priority. And they're not only visiting guys who they want to commit; they're checking in on guys who have already committed, and that's good too. Because you mentioned Tyson Terry, Caden Ramas. Those guys in particular are going to be, I think, the backbone of this defense. And Jacqueline Carpenter, a big time playmaker on the offensive side of the football. So it was good to see them really kind of just reaffirm their connections with the kids and let them know that even though they're committed, they still care about them and they still want to check up on them.
Yeah, and it does make sense to go up and make sure that you have your commitment still in the fold. That's you always want to guard against all those. And yeah, Tyson Terry is going to be a big time player. I think he should be a 4-star recruit, but that's a conversation for another day. But and then in terms of Lofton and Christian Jones, it definitely feels like they've been gaining traction with both of those guys. It still feels like to me there's a better chance that Christian Jones could commit elsewhere than it feels to me like they've gained a lot of momentum with Chase Lofton. But they got both of those guys on campus, I think, multiple times during the spring. I believe they were both there for the spring games. So definitely things
Yep.
trending in the right direction there. And, it's just impressive the way that, it's like Nebraska sees, other schools coming for these guys, and Matt Rule just does whatever he can do to show them that they're a priority. And, if one of these guys decides to go somewhere else, like that's their choice. But Nebraska did everything they could, just like with Carter Nelson and, Isaiah McMorris, David Holt. They're doing everything they can to show these guys that they want them in Lincoln. And that's all you can do as a coaching staff. So, you got to appreciate that.
And I was talking to somebody the other day, and they noted that Notre Dame filled up their class. So I would say that Nebraska, I'm not going to say is a guaranteed lock to land Christian Jones, but I would feel very good about where they stand. The interesting thing with Chase Lofton is that Nebraska already has a ton of tight ends on the roster. Not that I wouldn't take Lofton, I would take him in a heartbeat, but I just wonder where he fits into everything, and where the already committed guys fit into everything if Lofton commits.
Yeah, and then Roman Ziebert is another one they're trying to get in this class too. Another in-state tight end, which is another place where all the coaches were. So, yeah, I think it's just about collecting as much talent as possible, and at some point, Thomas Fedoni will be leaving and like Porkachure. And so,
Yeah,
cycle
that's
those
true.
guys out. And yeah, Chase Law, I think especially it's interesting how well Nebraska has produced tight ends. And when you want to run the football like Nebraska does, as I've said, you need to have a strong group of tight ends, because the fullback, as much as we want to talk about the fullback and yada, 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 that position really doesn't exist anymore. And it's not just in college or the NFL. It doesn't really exist in high school. So, I mean, you're going to try to take somebody who's a tight end or something else and make them a fullback. It just makes more sense to have a bunch of tight ends on your roster and essentially use them as a fullback H-back type. So that's how I kind of look at it going forward.
Yeah, and I always thought it was criminal how Nebraska underutilized Austin Allen. Granted, a different coaching staff, but the previous regime ran the ball a lot too, and yet they still wanted to use a tight end, and they were still recruiting the position at a high level. I mean, at the time, Thomas Fedoni was the number one, I believe it was, overall recruit in the country in his class at tight end. Actually, no, I think Brock Bowers was number one. Fedoni was number two, and so there still would be a plan for the tight end position, even if they were a run, based offense. And now that Dylan Raiola is in the fold, that makes the tight end position a lot more valuable.
Yeah, definitely. I definitely think that's true. And, we've seen that too with, Bear Tanning committing in this class. I mean, they could be looking at another 3-man tight end class. I think probably 2, but, I really don't see him saying no to Ziebert if he wants to commit as well. So
No.
take 3 and find a way to play them all, man. I mean, the tight ends can bring a lot of value on special teams, the running game, especially when they can do, different things when they're such good pass catchers. So I necessarily don't have a problem with it, especially, if it's keeping another quality, in-state player home. To shift just a little bit, there's some other recruiting stuff going on this week that we have to touch on. TJ Lateef has been trending with the Huskers. Steve Wiltfong, I think Sean Callahan, Brian Munson have all put in expert projections for him to land with Nebraska. It seems like the Huskers really killed it on the spring game visit, and there's not like a commitment date set or anything, but some other schools that have been in the mix, like Colorado's offered some other quarterbacks. So it seems like Nebraska is very close to a commitment from TJ Lateef. It might even be a silent commitment at this point.
Lateef would be huge because he kind of is the same mold of the quarterbacks that they currently have on the roster. When you look at especially Raiola and Daniel Kalen, Lateef is a pocket passer primarily, but he's not limited to that. He can run outside the pocket and run when he needs to. He's got an incredibly strong arm, and I could definitely see where he fits in this offense, especially when you have built the offensive line and you're continuing to build the offensive line. That makes obviously life easier for the quarterback. So I feel really good about where Lateef would fit stylistically in terms of this offense, and it's good to know that even with Raiola and Kalen on the roster already, that we're still going after highly touted quarterbacks, and that these quarterbacks see what Nebraska's building and want to come to Lincoln.
Yeah, great job by Glenn Thomas. Yeah, I'm gonna have to give him credit. He's done a really good job in this recruitment, and it's been a lot of the same things. I remember, I think when they offered TJ Lateef, I want to say they had every coach there for the offer.
Yeah,
I want to say, or at least the offensive coaches. So that's like a tactic that they've used a lot, and it seems to be pretty successful with kids. And I mean, when you have your entire coaching staff there, I think it's hard not to at least feel like a priority. And then looking at last week in the offense and the way that those young quarterbacks have developed so quickly, you have to, if you're a young quarterback like TJ Lateef, you had to feel like, man, if I come here, I can learn under Dylan Raiola, I'm going to get developed, I'm going to have skill guys, and I'm going to have, a lot of other things too, the fan support and all that other stuff. But yeah, that would be a huge 4-star commitment. Lateef is number 238 overall in the 24/7 composite rankings. He's the 17th best quarterback, the number 23 player in the state of California. So he would be another big time player. And then I guess that would give you some insurance down the road too, if potentially, I don't think Daniel Kalen will, but if he eventually wanted to go somewhere else and play, he could still have Lateef to develop. 2026 quarterback recruiting is also getting very interesting because you have the Vanden Bosch kid, you have Raiola, You have some other quarterbacks in the state doing very well. So it's going to be interesting to see who kind of emerges. We were in that same situation in 2025, like who's going to emerge as the top target. For a while, it was Alex Mansky and now Lateef. And so that's what I'm kind of interested is it going to be Dayton Raiola in 2026? Is it going to be somebody else? Like who's going to be that guy that they target at quarterback in that class?
I'd be very surprised, honestly, if it wasn't Dayton Raiola, given the
Yeah.
connections in the program. But we'll see. And it's interesting how, ever since Glenn Thomas arrived, there's been an uptick in California quarterback recruiting. So that's an area that they're focusing on, and why not? I mean, the greatest of all time came from California, so it must be some good mojo there. And obviously, I'm not an idiot. There's a bunch of other really, really talented quarterbacks that came from California. But as a Patriots fan, I got to tip my cap to Mr. Brady.
Yeah, and I mean, I think Aaron Rodgers is from California,
Yep.
though he's not the quarterback that Tom Brady is or was, but still pretty good. I'm not sure about Joe Montana, though. I have no idea where he's from, but I know he played his pro football in California, most of it. So, but yeah, it's definitely not a bad idea to get talent out of California. It would be good to see Nebraska get more of it, but getting TJ Lateef definitely would be huge. And then another guy that was really blown away by his visit during the spring game was Michael Terry, the 5-star out of Texas. He actually, I haven't seen a recruit do this before, but he actually I don't know where he got the video from, if he did it himself or if Nebraska provided it to him, but he had video of his visit and he put together
That was a
an
great
interview.
video.
Yeah. And he talked about, he captioned it that Matt Rule isn't playing fair, which tells you not playing fair, the recruiting visit was so good. And he said Nebraska set the bar high, exceeded his expectations. And I haven't seen him put out a video about his trips to Texas or Texas A&M yet. I know those are the other schools really in it, but man, I feel like you have to close this out. But Nebraska's in the lead, and I'm not the only one who's saying that. I mean, I think it was Chad Simmons or some of the national experts have said it. No crystal balls or anything yet, but in a good spot, Nebraska is for Michael Terry.
I've never seen a video like that either, and which made me think that not only were we very much involved in his recruitment, but that we're kind of in the lead, and that would be massive. I mean, I've loved Michael Terry. I've watched his film over the past couple months, and he's just a dynamic player. I mean, it makes sense. The state of Texas, this is where they want to recruit in, and he is a stud. I would be absolutely thrilled if Nebraska was able to get Michael Terry, and even a couple hours after the spring game, he was posting how much he loved his time in Lincoln and how much he loved the spring game. So Nebraska definitely knocked it out of the park with their spring game presentations and in their overall visits with recruits, I think.
And it's interesting how they had an official visit with Terry this weekend, TJ Lateef, Cortez Mills. A lot of times those happen in May and June. The calendar is a little bit different. So Oregon is going to host Michael Terry for a visit on May 17th. Then it's Texas A&M on June 13th. Texas is also, in the mix, but this guy is just an incredible athlete. He's ranked number 28 overall. He's the number one athlete in the entire 2025 class. Probably would be a receiver at Nebraska, but he doesn't have to be. He ran as a sophomore, according to his 24/7 profile, a 10.83 in the 100. So you can imagine what he's running now as a senior. Just an all-around incredible athlete. And yeah, I feel like Nebraska, is definitely in the lead. This guy had 21 touchdowns last year, 800 rushing, 31 catches for 436 yards. So man, looking at all those skill guys, you have to just imagine what it would be like if they could add Michael Terry. I don't know if they could add Michael Terry and Cortez Mills, but man, if they could, Nebraska's offense would be fun to watch over the next few seasons.
Who would you choose between the two? Because I really like both, and I was a big Mills guy too. But if it comes down, who would you choose?
Oh God, that's like a split the baby type thing because they're my two favorite recruits in this class. I don't know. I'd probably go with Michael Terry just because he has the extra size because he's 6'2". Cortez Mills is not quite that built, but I mean, when the coaching staff views him as a Devontae Smith, the guy who won the Heisman for Alabama, it's also hard to say, that you wouldn't want him too. So, but yes, Michael Terry, 6'3", 210. That's pretty. I mean, that size I think gives him the edge slightly. But I love Cortez Mills as much as anybody. I love the big hat he was wearing too. Although some of my Nebraska fans didn't like it, but you know how that is.
Welcome to the modern age. People get used to it.
They're cool. They are. They're hilariously, big, and I would like one. So if
Yeah,
any Nebraska
me too.
people
That'd be
want to
cool.
send me a
Yeah,
gigantic hat like this big,
I
maybe
need
that's
to
what
find it and then wear it during our next shows.
maybe that's the good luck charm the Huskers have been missing. If we both have the gigantic hat, maybe they'll start going undefeated again.
It's like Michael Jordan's shoes from Space Jam. Nobody knows exactly what the powers are in it, but somehow it makes all the recruits commit to Nebraska.
Whatever they got to do, man. But Matt Rule definitely has some really talented guys interested in Nebraska, which I think is a good thing. I'm trying to think if there's any. I think that's all the recruiting notes for right now. They're actually Broderick Scholl, I should say, is a 4-star offensive tackle who's going to be visiting this weekend. And there's actually going to be some players visiting this weekend during May. Let's see, Nicholas Clayton is another one that's going to be visiting, taking an official visit. And he's an interesting prospect, 6'5", 205-pound edge out of Gainesville, Florida. Not the biggest offer list, but when you think about it, Nebraska doesn't have a lot of like edge guys on the board. So I think that's actually a pretty important visit to keep track of this weekend.
Yeah, for sure. And I like what they do have at the edge position, to be fair, but you're right. They need depth there.
And then, so some transfer portal talk. Not a lot of things happening in the transfer portal, but a few. So JVR Suggs to start is a guy that Nebraska was interested in, along with like 40 other schools. I think we mentioned him. He ended up he released a top 6, and Nebraska didn't make the cut. So cross that name off your list. I don't think it was really that realistic, but
Yeah.
he could have been the third guy on the front of the defensive line when they played a 3-man front. But at any rate. But they are interested in Jaden Mangum, the former Michigan State safety. Actually intercepted a pass against Nebraska last year. Played pretty. Had a nice, I think, a tackle. Yeah, had a tackle for loss too. So he's visiting, according to 24/7 Sports, and actually On 3 said the same thing. But he's visiting Ohio State this week, then Nebraska on Monday, and then Michigan next week. So those are the 3 teams that seem to be in the mix. Nebraska had him on campus for an official visit as a recruit. He was. They viewed him as a receiver / cornerback. He's played safety the last 2 years. I think he would fit perfect in this defense because we've talked about, guys who can cover and play safety or whatever, but 4 interceptions in 2 seasons. So what do you think about the potential fit of Jaden Mangum here for this defense?
I really like it. I mean, like you mentioned, he had an outstanding game against us when the 2 teams met last year, and it would add a continued depth to, the safety spot. And, he's a guy that brings versatility to the defense. And not only can he provide all those things, but he also has Big Ten experience. So I would definitely watch out for, that visit next week. And, I think it's a position of need. And we'll see what happens. I actually remember when Nebraska was recruiting him. I believe, was it 2021, if I'm not mistaken?
I think it was 2022.
2022.
Close.
So, I mean, he's a dynamic athlete and a very good player. So I would love to have him here.
Yeah, he's 6'2". I think it's like 185 pounds. So yeah, he's not like the biggest safety in the world, but he will play around the box. He had 53 tackles last year. But I think he does a really good job covering a lot of range in the back end. So, I mean, that wouldn't be a bad thing at all. And he's got 2 years left to play. So that's, another box for the Huskers. They want guys that are multi-year guys. Suggs was a multi-year guy. Terrence Brooks, the cornerback from Texas, has 2 years left. So that kind of is what they're looking for. They're not really after, just that 1-year guy. Maybe if they feel like they had a position of need, but I don't think they really have, one position where I'm like, they have to fill this spot. I feel pretty good overall, but you can always have more talent, especially in the secondary with the way teams throw the football anymore. You can never have enough of that. And you can never have enough linemen either, whether it's offensive or defensive. But for the record, I feel really good about the Nebraska offensive line, as good as I felt. I can't remember when I felt this good about the offensive line. I'll just say that it hasn't been since probably Bo Pelini was the head coach.
And I'd just love to see a little bit more corner depth with the Bly Hill injury, just to shore up the defensive backfield. But other than that, I feel like we're in a pretty good spot overall. And that's a testament to how hard this coaching staff has recruited and how hard, they've been able to evaluate talent and also seal the deal on these visits, which is why I think June is going to be another big month. You remember I think we had double-digit level commitments last June. I'm hoping for another big June this year. Honestly, last June was when they really built the core of their 2024 class. So I'm hoping some that can happen again, it's interesting because in these last two classes, they've gotten some commitments over the winter, January, March, when official visits happen. They don't really have a ton of commitments following the spring games, but then it's almost like the spring game begins their summer push into May and June, and by that point, they've done their work and they've stayed in contact with the recruits they want, and then June is when they seal the deal, and then it seems like once the season starts, they have their classes pretty much wrapped up with the exception of a few spots here and there.
Yeah, and last June they got, Carter Nelson, Kalen McMorris, Davon Hall. They got some other guys.
Kalen they actually got in May, believe it or not.
Oh,
They
that's
got
right.
McMorris
That's right.
and Hall in June, though, which was big.
Yeah, and they all were on that official visit. I remember that. You're
Yeah.
right. But still, that was a good time for the Huskers that month or so. And I remember Raiola committed wherever else he committed to, Georgia, and then they made the big push for Daniel Kalen and flipped him from Missouri, who's now a top 10 SEC team. So really, if you think about it, Nebraska flipped quarterbacks from two SEC teams that are preseason top 10 right now. Flipped both of them in one cycle.
Two Elite 11 quarterbacks.
Two Elite 11 quarterbacks.
Let's not forget that too. I mean, it's almost like with the way that they're recruiting, that they were a 11-1, 12-0 team last year and not 5-7.
Yeah, it's going to be, well, hopefully this year we're going into next season. We're going to be recruiting as an actual 11-1 or 10-2 team. Maybe not, but there is a lot of, positive buzz about the Huskers right now. If you haven't watched the Joel Klatt episode where he kind of breaks down his top 25, you definitely should. You should definitely listen to the part he talks about Nebraska. He has them, I think, at 22. He has us ranked ahead of Iowa, I think, by like one spot, which I like.
I'm looking right now, so.
I know Nebraska has a lot to prove. They have to prove a lot of things, but basically what he was saying is, this was one of the best defenses in the Big Ten. It's what we've all said, but the good running game, and then they led the nation in turnovers, by quarterbacks by a very wide margin. And so he was talking about, in the games they lost by 3 points, I think, which was 4 games, they were negative 15 in turnovers. So, even if like Dylan Raiola doesn't need to be a superstar, like people, are talking about how many touchdown passes he's going to throw or blah, 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 blah. I'm worried about one statistic, and that's the interceptions. And if he keeps that number below 10, which I believe very strongly that he's going to do, like, how does this team not win 8 or 9 games? Like, I don't see how they don't, because they would have last year if they had that kind of quarterback play.
I'm worried about 2 things: the interceptions and the fumbles. If they can just clean those up, they'll be golden. And so I was just looking at Klatt's post-spring top 25. Nebraska's 22, Iowa's 24, and then I'm just trying to see who the 25th. I think it might be Kansas State now that I'm looking really quickly, but I know it's all hype. I know we've seen this before, and I know fans are tired of the preseason hype, and I get it, but at the same time, it's definitely encouraging that all these analysts see the same thing that we're seeing, and we're not just being Kool-Aid drinkers. So there is something to it. We'll see what happens. I mean, I'm thinking they can at least go 10-2, 9-3 based on the schedule, but you never know. If Raiola plays like he did during the spring game, we're gonna go undefeated and be national champions. But
maybe. I mean, I don't know. I don't know about national champions, but there's definitely a chance that they could be 7-0 going into that Ohio State game. I mean, I don't think that Joel Klatt even said that, which would be crazy. I mean, it would just be fun to have a game like that for Nebraska, and 2 7-0 teams, because Ohio State's schedule isn't that tough at the start of this year. So it would be really fun to have that hype again with Raiola. But we got to go do it. I mean, the big one, we have to beat Colorado. Please, for the love of God, we have to beat Colorado. That I want that victory so badly.
I mean,
that Iowa.
We're at Jeff Sims away from beating Colorado.
Yeah, I mean, I felt great about the game. Started so great last year, marched it right down the field. Then it was like 3rd and 4, whatever, and then Jeff Sims drops the snap at like the 30-yard line. It's like, oh, okay, well that won't happen again. And then it's interception. Then he drops another snap. I'm like, it was just like every time and it really wasn't any. I mean, their defense stopped us a couple times, but it was mostly just Jeff Sims interceptions and fumbles. Like, I think we got maybe 1 touchdown or 6 points in the first half, and we had like 4 drives inside the 30-yard line.
Yeah.
So, I mean, Yeah, last year was tough. The fumbles were an issue too, but a lot of them too, I feel like were, Harburg when they just ran him like way too much, and he was
Yeah,
just
when
like
they would run
beat
him
in
into
this
a loaded
upright
box.
position. Yeah,
When they would
and
run
then
him
they
into
had,
a loaded box because teams knew what was coming, and yeah.
and then he was so tall, it was like he was just a statue there, just waiting for. And then other teams would come and rip the ball out. I mean, you have to give credit to other teams; they really scouted that on Nebraska, and hopefully, I don't think we're going to see Harburg running the ball much, maybe a few times this year, but hopefully they can take care of the
I hope
football.
not,
But
just because he took a beating. He really did take a beating. I don't know how he was able to last through most of the
yeah,
season.
but really, if they just, I mean, we keep hammering it, but if they just reduce the turnover margin, if that turnover differential is just zero, like negative, I mean, not like -5, if it's just equal, like we have the same amount of turnovers as our opponents, this team will definitely win 8 games. But if they can somehow get to actually being positive, like imagine this team with a positive turnover ratio, because if they had one last year, they would have won the Big Ten West. I don't think that's that. Of course, they were like -30 overall, so I mean that would have been a massive difference. But without all those turnovers, they definitely would have won enough
I was
games
gonna
to win
say,
the
I'll
Big Ten
take even
West.
like -1 or -5, just not -30.
Yeah, man, just like please don't have the most turnovers by a quarterback in college football. I mean, and I don't think that we're going to see that at all with Dylan Raiola. He's
No.
so calm and poised, and as much as I'm excited by his physical arm talent, the thing that really excites me is the way he operates at the line of scrimmage with the protections, knowing how to get rid of the football too. Some of the best plays I thought that he made outside of the throws were just decisions he made not to throw the football
Yeah.
into trouble. And
Which is something that I feel like our previous quarterbacks were either not taught or just refused to do. Just throw it away.
And some guys just know how to play quarterback, and this kid looks like it. I mean, he's training with Patrick Mahomes and all those other things, but he's just got the mental makeup. But still have to go do it. So we'll see how it all works out. But I don't think that these guys are I don't think they're crazy, and I think that Nebraska can very much make a name for itself in this college football season as long as we can just not turn the football over.
Yeah, and I know we've had this talk, the past 3 years or whatever, or 2 years that we've been doing the show, but I really feel good about this year. And you can clip this and people can call us out at the end of the year, but I really do feel good about this year.
Well, pretty soon we'll do a show. Maybe we'll do predictions. We'll go game by game predictions, maybe. But
It's already May. We gotta get on it soon.
yeah, we do have to get on it. So that's gonna wrap it up for the show today, guys. So thanks for joining us. Remember to subscribe if you don't, hit like, get into the comment section, and check out HuskerBigRed.com for more information about the Huskers. And as always, go Big Red.
Go Big Red.